the political spectrum you're on, you feel that things are changing, and we're at a moment, a crossroads in history. And we have to decide now together, not from Washington. That's why the healthcare debate feels wrong, because we haven't been part of the debate. It's been with the unions and the special interests, and if it was with the pharmaceuticals and the big companies under Bush, it would have been wrong as well. Now it's all special interest. It doesn't seem to matter. That's why it's wrong, because we're not involved. And that's what has to change now. America has become a place that changed the world because it was a place where the individual mattered, where we decided, where we chose our own destiny. We didn't necessarily choose the same destiny for everybody, but we changed our direction. We could do anything. The Constitutional Convention back in Philadelphia, all of the founders gathered together. George Washington didn't want to go. When they finally knocked on his door, he was a farmer again. He had already served his country. When they asked him and said, "George, the whole thing's falling apart. General, please, we need you. You're the only one that everybody trusts. Please, come back to Philadelphia." He first said no. He said, one of the saddest quotes I've ever heard. He said, "Have I not done enough for my country yet?" He just wanted to be a farmer, and he had served his whole life, spent his whole life in the service of his country. He said, "No, I won't go." They said, "If you don't come, everything we worked for is gone." He came. So did Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was very old at this time. In fact, he had, I think it was kidney stones at the time, and he was in so much pain. He was taking opium every day. He tried to stay away from it because he hated what it did to his mind. But he was in so much pain, he couldn't actually walk to Independence Hall. He couldn't stand his feet on the cobblestones, because every time he stepped on the cobblestones, it hurt so deeply, and he didn't want to go to the convention on opium. So he had 4 prisoners from the local jail, and they carried him in a chair. Now, I don't know if those prisoners were from Guantanamo or if they had been read their rights. You have a right not to carry the big fat man in a chair. I don't know if that had happened. But he went. And George Washington sat there in front at the Constitutional Convention, and he didn't say very much. He didn't have to. It was his presence that really moderated everything. And there the old man, in pain, sat in the back of the room. And he watched George Washington, and after not too long, he became fascinated by the back of the chair that George was sitting in. The general was sitting in a chair where the back of the chair had rays of sun and a half of a sun. It was either a setting sun or a rising sun. And during the entire convention, he sat there and he just watched the general, and he stared at that chair. Finally, when the Constitution was done, he felt compelled to speak, and he said, "I've wondered this whole time if that sun on that chair was setting or rising. But now that I see the miracle that has happened here, I feel that I can firmly state that that is a rising sun." He had hope for tomorrow. What has happened to us now is we have fundamentally changed already. We have already started to look at things, and we're now just trying to hang on. Just hang on, hang on. We are a country that is hanging by our fingernails. Just hold on, don't let go, don't let go. That's not what America is or has ever been. We have never been a people that just hang on. That puts us in a setting sun mode. Tonight I want you to ask yourself, is that sun on America rising, or is that sun setting? We've had trouble before, but it's always been the individual that changed it. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. When I was a kid, I wanted to work at Radio City. I wanted to have studios in Radio City. I grew up in just north of Seattle. I don't even know how I knew Rockefeller Plaza, but I wanted to work in Radio City. I wanted to live in New York. I was 8. I didn't know any better. I've always been fascinated by New York. I've always been fascinated by the history of New York. New York, I have the same thing that happens, really, to Ben Franklin every day. I'm so lucky I have a corner office not too far away from here, and I'm way up in one of the high-rises. And on one corner window, I look at this building, the Chrysler Building, just an incredible, incredible building. I've had this for years before I moved to New York. This, of course, the Empire State Building. I look at the Chrysler Building out of one window, the Empire State Building in another, and just at the end of my hall, I see Times Square. And I can't tell you how many days we put the TV and radio show together in my office, and everybody leaves. And I look at those two buildings, which to me represent an age where America was still moving forward. They weren't hanging by the thread. They were dreaming. And I look at those and I think, is that the best we'll ever do? Is it a rising sun or is it a setting sun? The Chrysler Building provides for me all kinds of inspiration. Every day, every morning, the sun rises over that building and I watch it rise. It is so beautiful in the morning because this turns all pink and orange. And then, because there are ribbons, metal ribbons that run down this building, it catches the sunlight. And I watch it every single morning, and I am inspired by these buildings. But I am inspired really by the people who built these buildings. The Chrysler Building was built at a time where skyscrapers were unheard of. Nobody had built a skyscraper before. The tallest building in the world was the Eiffel Tower. Could we build anything bigger than the Eiffel Tower, especially a building? Could it be done? Well, there were two men and two buildings at the same time that wanted to make the tallest building in the world. It's one of my favorite stories of the Chrysler Building. And the other building is the Bank of Manhattan Trust Building. I don't know much about that building. I just know that it was the tallest building in the world for one day. And here's why. This building was actually finished before the Manhattan Trust Building. This building was finished, but there was no needle on top. There was a flag. They waited. They put the flag on and announced that the Chrysler Building was done. Then the Manhattan Trust Building added a couple floors to be able to beat the Chrysler Building, put their flag on it, and that's when it's been described as people walking down the street looking at the Chrysler Building and stopping for hours to watch a giant needle slowly come out of the top of the Chrysler Building. It was built inside the building so the competitor wouldn't know. And when the time was right, when Manhattan Trust said, "We are done," and they had their pictures taken for the newspaper for that one day, that's when Mr. Chrysler said, "Crank her up." And the needle came out of the top. It's an amazing story. This building happened near the same time. When they built this building, it was actually, I think, only supposed to be about this tall. But the joke was, you couldn't build it this tall. You couldn't build it just a couple of floors bigger than the Chrysler Building, because the joke was, and they were half serious, we don't know if there's more needle in this building. So first,